Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, here with my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And we will be getting into or part two, I should say, of our quarterback rankings. This video is going to be a lot more geared towards Superflex, our Superflex audience. Obviously, we went through the first three tiers yesterday. So we'll be going through the second three tiers. We're going to get kind of into the nitty gritty and the guys we don't necessarily even think are worth drafting in Superflex as more than like a QB4, and get into some of these bottom end guys. So without further ado, let's get into it. So starting off tier 4 here, the back end QB2's. These are guys that we still like as starters in Superflex, right? These are the guys that if you kind of skip out on quarterback and you load up at receiver and running back early, you're kind of trying to look to get two of these guys maybe in back-to-back rounds, in like round 5 and 6 or round 6 and 8 type of thing, whatever you can do to get a couple of these guys before it really falls off. And to start this tier off, we have Matthew Stafford. I really like Matthew Stafford this year. It's a lot of people might say, he probably should be pushed up, or what's really the difference between him and Kirk Cousins? And, that's fair. And I think people have him even maybe above Cousins because their weapons in the offense is still really good, right? They brought in Blake Corum to boost the backfield, so it doesn't have to fall all on Kyron, or if Kyron gets banged up, they have another option there in the backfield. And then, second year Puka is going to go, or is going to be an established player here now, so we can count on him in the offense. And Kupp coming into the year healthy, I think, is going to be also a big boost for Stafford. So he's definitely a guy that I like to target. I think he has some decent upside as well. No rushing, obviously, so it kind of just limits what he's able to do. But he has 4,500 yard upside in terms of throwing the ball, and I think he's a solid target if you wait at quarterback.
Yeah, and the perfect example is, we did that mock draft for Superflex where we waited on quarterback and we ended up with Justin Herbert and Matt Stafford. And we ended up really liking our team because we were at such an advantage at the wide receiver position. So Stafford's definitely somebody I'm going to be targeting in Superflex. Obviously, you mentioned Nacua, Kupp coming back healthy. I even think that their defense probably will take a little bit of a step back as well. So we might see even more
Donald,
shootout
of course,
from them.
how could it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get better, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he's a really good target in Superflex and even in standard leagues as your second quarterback if you take a flyer on maybe one of the higher upside type guys with a lower floor.
Yeah, so getting into number 19, and this is going to be controversial here because Jayden Daniels is getting pushed up, especially in one QB league rankings, all the way up into 12. I've even seen him up at 11. So I'm obviously hesitant to push him up that high because I don't want to have to rely on him as a QB1, as possibly your first quarterback. If he's your second quarterback, or maybe even like you're looking to get in on some high upside as your third quarterback in this area, of the draft, or maybe he falls a little lower than expected. And obviously the rushing upside is massive. I mean, I saw somebody talking about who has 1,000-yard rushing upside, right? And Daniels gets mentioned in that conversation. So, there's some pretty tantalizing upside here if he can realize it. But in Superflex, if you do that and it doesn't work out and he only rushes for 500 and he's like a 3,200 yard passer, the touchdown or the offense isn't as good as maybe we think it's going to be, and they just can't score very much, you're going to be disappointed that you have him. So, as somebody that you don't need to start, as somebody that you're taking in round 13 of your one QB drafts, okay, like I can be fine with that over all these guys, right? All these guys would be on the waiver wire. You can just go get Matt Stafford if it doesn't work out, or you've already drafted a Kyler Murray and you get Jayden Daniels at the end of your draft. But for me, this one is just, I'm going to have a hard time going in on him hardly anywhere, especially in Superflex. And so if he gets pushed down, I'll be interested in the upside, depending on where he falls to. But overall, I'm way below consensus on him.
Yeah, and I think I've talked about this at length during our pre-draft stuff. I just have this bad feeling that Jayden Daniels is going to be a bust in the NFL. And I hope I eat my words because he's a very fun player to watch. But LSU was kind of the perfect storm. We didn't see him play that great when he was at ASU. Goes to LSU. He's got 2 top 15 wide receiver draft picks. He's got one of the best offensive lines in the country. The way he runs and the way he takes hits, it's just not necessarily sustainable in the NFL. I mean, he runs so upright. He's not sliding. Again, they'll teach him to try to protect himself, but I just think the instincts and with his frame, I worry about injury. I worry about a much poorer offensive line in NFL competition. And yeah, I don't know. I just have a bad feeling he's going to be a bust. But I hope for the opposite. But he's someone I'm going to be staying away from in Superflex specifically. Now, in like you said, regular redraft, standard leagues, best ball flyer, sure, fine with the rushing stuff. But I don't know, man.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not like he's built like Anthony Richardson or like
Right.
Josh Allen. He's tall, he's 6'4", but he's only like 210, 215 maybe. So, taking hits is not going to be conducive to health or success for him. So if we get into week 1 or 2, and it's almost like Richardson from last year, he's actually playing up to a high level, but then has all of these injury issues with getting hit. That's another element to his game that that we're both worried about. So we got to move off Daniels now. We're going to go to pick number 20, who is Deshaun Watson.
So I'm pretty optimistic about Watson for a couple of reasons. I think the situation in Cleveland is actually a pretty decent one. They want to throw the ball. Stefanski's a good play caller. They brought in Jerry Jeudy. I think they ran the most plays in the NFL last year. We saw, Flacco come off the couch and be a stud quarterback, and then also kind of still got his rushing upside. So I think, this late in the draft to have, what could be a very low floor, and, maybe he ends up just being a total bust and his glory were behind him at Houston, but he's someone that I'm going to be taking a shot on because he's got the arm talent, he's got the weapons, he's got the offense, and he's got the rushing upside. Maybe I'm just talking myself into this, and you can talk me down a little bit, but I'm a little bit more optimistic on him than others.
Yeah, and you had brought up also in the or in earlier videos that we've done that he was QB8 in ADP last year. And people did have high hopes for him coming back, and the fact that he's gone from that, and it's not exactly like he was terrible fantasy wise. He wasn't great throwing the ball, but I think maybe another year removed. Like we're gonna kind of not talk about that too much, but another year removed from it, full off season, going into his second full year as the starter here in Cleveland. I think, like you said, the weapons are kind of there, and it just feels like he should be higher than this, but there's just a lot of good quarterbacks right now, and no reason really to take a big risk on, somebody that has some history, injury history now, and on top of, all of the other distractions that he causes. So, there's obviously the element too of like, I totally get it if you don't want to draft him. I kind of feel that way. So, I don't know. I think he's an interesting pick. He obviously has upside. I mean, we've seen him be a top 5 quarterback. He's got the rushing upside that you look for, and he's got good weapons. So I could see him being a good value at the quarterback position here. And
In last year,
somebody that's a good back end two starter for sure.
In last year, in 3 out of his 5 healthy games, he was a top 10 fantasy QB. So it's there. It's just, there's some major question marks, but that's built into his ADP.
Yep, 100%. All right, so getting into number 21, we got Aaron Rodgers. So he's also pushed down quite a bit from last year. I mean, he was going in the mid-teens last year as at quarterback, and if he's healthy, it's hard to argue with how good he could be. I mean, he's got Garrett Wilson, which is an elite weapon. He's got Mike Williams, which is another very good field stretcher. And Rodgers obviously can still sling it. So, and that's not even to mention Breece Hall out of the backfield. Like, we saw how successful Aaron Jones was all those years in Green Bay with Rodgers. So, there's definitely the potential for Hall to rack up a bunch of receptions with Rodgers as his quarterback. So, um, another guy that I just really wouldn't mind as my second starter. You get kind of down into this tier. We talked about maybe trying to get two of these guys as your starters if you load up in other positions. And he's another great example of why in a 10-team Superflex league where you have 3 wide receivers starting, it's just there's so many players that you need to get into your starting lineup that these quarterbacks are going to kind of trickle down into round 7, into round 8, maybe even. So,
Yeah.
kind of if you want to attack that from a draft perspective, right? From a draft strategy perspective, I would recommend it. I wouldn't tie yourself to needing to get 2 quarterbacks super early because these guys can still produce down here. And I really like Rodgers this year as well, as long as he can stay healthy. Obviously, last year was a nightmare, but I don't think that's going to happen again. And I expect to see him back and fully healthy.
Yeah, and their number one priority in the offseason was to bolster the offensive line, and they absolutely did that. And when you're talking about, the value of a certain draft pick, when I'm looking at this board right now and I'm looking at Brock Purdy and Aaron Rodgers, and you tell me that Aaron Rodgers is going to have a full healthy season, is there going to be that massive of a gap between those two guys? Maybe, but is it worth, giving up on a wide receiver 2 to pass on him? Maybe not. So he's someone I'm going to be targeting too. But at the same time, it's the Jets, and it could fall apart, and he can go on an ayahuasca trip and end up in a cave somewhere. So let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah, the Murphy's Law part of this, right? What can go wrong will go wrong, right? That's kind of got Rodgers written all over it, but and the Jets, I should say, written all over it. But I'm not worried about the OTA thing, right? The mandatory minicamp, whatever. They can all get past that. Like this is the part of the time of year where Rodgers loves to do that to get the media attention on him. He just
Rodgers likes attention. Oh,
yeah, shocking, right? Breaking news from us here, which he does it every year, so I don't get why we're still talking about it every year. It's like, dude, just leave him alone, and he won't do it anymore because the attention doesn't just flock to him on the first day of mandatory minicamp, and he's not there, and it's all of the headlines are all about. All of the headlines are all about Rodgers for that week, and then he shows up and then nobody cares. So, okay. So getting into number 22, we've got Baker Mayfield. So again, I think the theme here is that in Superflex, you guys should be looking at these players these quarterbacks that can still play, that can still produce, right? That he's another one who surprised us all last year. He performed really well. He's got really good weapons. And yet, despite how well he played, still shows up at number 22 here, which isn't necessarily even a starter in a 10-team Superflex league, but like he easily can be. So it just seems like something that you can take advantage of, or you can continue to take advantage of down here, and all the upside in the world on a week-to-week basis. I mean, there were weeks where Baker was ranked inside the top 10 at quarterback going into the week. So, getting in on, and even if you have your first 2 set up, getting in on this tier as your third guy is very valuable because bye weeks, injuries, making sure you have another player here that you can lock in as your top bench option at quarterback or top trade piece if you need help at other positions and somebody needs a quarterback. These guys are still hold a lot of value. So
I mean, he finished QB10 last year, which was a surprise. But Baker's kind of weird. Like that game that he was kind of coming out of nowhere to save the Rams that one game, and then he comes to Tampa Bay and does his thing. But I guess my concern is with Dave Canales leaving, we saw the dip that Geno went through after Canales left Seattle. Again, kind of nitpicking. I do think Baker in a Superflex league is someone that I would not necessarily feel comfortable targeting as my number 2 quarterback. Number 3 is a different story. You can kind of play that matchup game. We know how he can be in shootouts. We know the weapons that he has, and just to add to the weapons, I mean, we know his top 2 guys, but we saw Kate Otten in the playoffs look kind of like a stud tight end one. They drafted, Jalen McMillan out of Washington, who I think is a very underrated player. So he's got guys around him. We know he's going to dump it off to Rashad White. I just worry with kind of this like Baker roller coaster that we've seen over his career that we might be kind of in for a letdown. But again, finishing QB 10 and being ADP 22, I think that's totally fine.
Right. And I mean that's what we're talking about here with Baker is he doesn't have to be better than he was last year. He can take a step back and he still can be valuable at QB 22, right? And if he's even goes up a few spots up to QB 17 or 16, and he's startable, that's kind of what you're looking for here. All right. So getting into the next tier here. So this is kind of your last chance, basically, right? To get a QB2, maybe, if you missed on all of these guys, last chance to get a starter. But also, I think for us, this is kind of the last chance to get a QB3. The last tier is going to be guys that we just don't know exactly if they're even going to be rosterable all year in a 10-team Superflex league specifically. So these guys are the guys that you want to make sure if you're looking for a third quarterback, or if that's something that you want to do as part of your draft strategy, that this is the tier that you don't want to miss on, right? That if you're worried about reaching, or you feel like, there's certain values that, you just play the board, right? These are the guys that maybe you draft around earlier than you otherwise would to make sure you get one. And that tier starts with Geno Smith.
Geno. So I'll take this one to start, if you don't mind. Kind of the opposite of Baker. I think he's going to be a positive regression candidate. I think Ryan Grubb taking over as the OC is going to be a big boost for him and the 3 wide receivers. I mean, we saw the type of system that he ran at Washington, where he supported 3 wide receivers, and Michael Penix had really a career year over there. Just some kind of deeper statistics on that. He was 26 in red zone touchdown percentage, some other kind of weird advanced stats that kind of went against their favor. But yeah, I think we're going to see a big step forward from JSN. I think DK is still kind of in the prime of his career as that X receiver. And I think that, we're going to see Geno as of we did in 2022.
Yeah, I think he's a big bounce back candidate, right? I think he's the perfect QB3. I obviously don't want him as my QB2, but like if you had to, getting in on him wouldn't be the worst thing in the world here. And I actually picked him as my QB1 last year. I picked him in the 6th round. I just kind of went away from quarterbacks entirely. And that didn't work out last year. But the idea being that that's kind of what I thought of him last year. I thought he was going to be a good quarterback, and like you said, in 2022, he was great. So I agree. I think he's going to improve this year. And I think he's definitely a good target to have.
And they ran the fewest amount of plays last year. So I would expect a big uptick in tempo from them.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. So getting into 24, Will Levis. We like to talk about him quite a bit as like this, you can wait until Will Levis type of discussion, and
buyer beware.
Yeah, buyer beware. But he is the 2nd-year player, right? He's kind of the rook or the newcomer here of this group that has more upside, I'd say, than any of these guys. We saw in his first game, right? He went out and tossed 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards, and obviously struggled after that. But full offseason, they committed to him too. They went and they took a lineman at 7 overall. They didn't draft any other quarterbacks. They're going to hand the reins over to him for the time being this year. And, that can cause a little bit of concern. We talk about making sure you get players that are going to start and that you don't have to worry about from week to week being, how should I say this, right? Being benched week to week, just constantly talking about it in the media, having to read news articles about, is Will Levis going to get benched for whoever? And so that's going to come a little bit with this pick, but I think overall he's worth the gamble as your QB3. If you're looking, or you end up with Baker as your QB2, right? Or you end up with Watson as your QB2, and you want to make sure you want to take a shot on somebody who has a little bit more upside that could possibly leapfrog those guys. I think Levis is your guy in this tier.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they really committed to him. They signed Calvin
Yep.
Ridley. They've already got D Hop. Obviously they drafted Latham, like you mentioned, but they signed center Lloyd Cushenberry, the highest paid guy, off the market this year to kind of bolster that O line. Levis was terrible under pressure last year, but we've seen what he can do, like you said, with a clean pocket, and he's probably got a top 5 arm in terms of just strength. So he's a fun lotto ticket. I've taken him a lot in best ball drafts too, just for the spike weeks. But like you said, we're kind of getting into that number 3, number 4 type tier. But hope the best for him because he's fun to watch when he's on.
Yeah, and another thing to add that's not really about him, more as weapons, is they went out and they added Calvin Ridley and they lost Derrick Henry.
Yeah,
So there's an interesting element to this where the Titans have been so run heavy for as long as we can all remember, basically. And they brought in Pollard, so they have Pollard and Spears in the backfield, but that's not the same thing. And they brought in Ridley. They still have D Hop, so the Chigokonkwo is still there. They have the offensive weaponry now where it feels like they could, you know, increase their pass percentage by 5%, 8%, and that could lead to 3 or 4 more attempts a game, which can raise his ceiling just a little bit, right? Not overwhelming or anything. They're still going to try and run the ball, I would guess, but the personnel shifts in this offseason, I think, also will help his production. Number 25. This is my
there's your
favorite guy
guy.
at the tier.
There's your
Derek
guy.
Carr.
Go ahead.
Derek Carr. I get worn out about my Derek Carr love, but he's ranked down here every year, and then every year he's in the top 15 quarterbacks. He's never in the top 10, but he's always 12, 16, 14, and he doesn't get any credit for it, really. I mean, everybody always sees, Taysom Hill came in and stole touchdowns, or he had 4 points that one week, and it's like, okay, but like we're not talking about a top end quarterback here. We're talking about picking at 25. And if you need a guy that can start, or if you run into an injury, you can't do much better than Derek Carr, I don't think, in terms of just getting somebody who can kind of consistently help you and be worth a start. He's not going to get benched, and that's kind of rare down in this tier. Once you get outside the top, 2022, it just feels like any of the guys can get benched at any moment. And Carr doesn't come with that risk. So having somebody you can just stick on your bench and leave there, people run into bye week problems. People run into injury problems. He's also another trade chip. He's not worth much, but you can still get, we play Superflex 3 wide receivers. I think we've hammered that point home. You can get a wide receiver 3 for him, or a wide receiver 4 that you can plug in, right? Somebody's first receiver off the bench for him, type of deal if you need it, or you run into other sorts of injury problems. So, I've taken Carr a lot. I'm partial towards him just because I look at the numbers over a long period of time and have trouble thinking that, anything's going to change with him now. He's going to be QB 17. So he doesn't have the upside really to get into the top 10 like a lot of these other guys do. But, at this point, I'm very happy to take him.
Yeah, no, those are all good points. And before someone comments that he's not going to get benched, Jameis Winston's not on the team anymore, so they don't have that electric backup. And their O line does project to still be very bad, but they did take Olu Fashanu. No, Talisi Fuaga, I'm sorry, with their first
Fuaga,
pick,
yeah.
who at the very least should help the run game, which would keep the offense rolling. And I'm obviously more optimistic and bullish than some on Carr just because I've got Olave so high. Maybe not as bullish as you are. But yeah, I hope he holds it together for Olave's sake, because that's someone I'll be having on a lot of my teams, as we'll discuss in the wide receiver episode.
Yeah, and honestly, that's why you think Winston's electric. You just want him to chuck it up to Olave deep. You don't care if there's picks or anything. You just want to see that one. You want to see 150 in the box score for Olave.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, so getting into 26, we got Daniel Jones. So I don't know how you feel about Daniel Jones, but obviously going into last year, it felt like with his rushing upside that he should be a pretty good pick. I did actually take him in a draft or two. I know the guy that took him in our home league was very excited to get him in the 5th round. And, it just couldn't have worked out any more poorly last year. But his ADP is pushed so far down now that kind of feels like we could take a chance on him here. And he's got a lot of upside. He's obviously got downside to not be ownable, but the upside, and he's got a new weapon in Malik Neighbors. So if he's able to get him the ball successfully, and I know they lost Saquon, so that's going to be hard on the offense overall. How could it not be? But getting a new weapon in and kind of bolstering that pass offense at the wide receiver position. They also lost Darren Waller, so I don't know. This is going to look very different, it feels like to me, on offense.
I'm with you.
So we'll see.
I'm all for him as kind of a late round lotto ticket, because he was QB9 2 years ago, and like you mentioned, being drafted pretty highly last year. And I think that with the addition of Neighbors and hopefully the second year step from what am I drawing this blank? The Tennessee wide receiver, third rounder from 2 years ago. Hyatt. Hopefully Hyatt will take a step forward. We know Wandale, what his role is, but Jones on the upside is going to be playing for his job. Downside is if things go poorly, he very well could be benched over there, and the narrative on Dable, as high as it was 2 years ago, could quickly be a hot seat conversation. But as a late round lotto ticket in Superflex, he's someone that has a higher ceiling than someone like a Derek Carr.
Totally agree. All right, so that's the end of the last chances, right? So we get four quarterbacks into that tier. And the guy who leads off this tier, I think we kind of debated if we should have him in tier 5 or if we should put him in tier 6. But for the purpose of conversation, we put him in tier 6. And leading that off is going to be Bryce Young. I personally don't mind Bryce Young that much. I think he could find his way into that last chance tier pretty easily. I think, even could have more upside. He's very accurate with the ball. And so, the Panthers were just a mess last year. He didn't have a lot of protection. He didn't have any weapons, but now they bring in Deontay Johnson, who is just a master class at getting open.
That was the perfect acquisition.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's going to be, on target. His on-target throws to Deontay, I think, are going to be great. Deontay's always open, very good at earning targets. And then they also brought in big-time X-receiver from South Carolina, Xavier Legette. And whether or not you think he's any good, I think he can actually help stretch the field, and he's much better than Jonathan Mingo or whoever else they had on the team last year. So, getting 2 new weapons there, I think, is great. And then also they brought in Jonathan Brooks, and he's the most explosive running back in the class. And I think, assuming health, right, he's got to get right health-wise. But I think adding a explosive element to the running game is going to do nothing but open up the offense even that much more. So the skill position players completely revamped from last year. I don't think it's entirely fair, that Young is getting evaluated very harshly. I know what he had to do last year with literally nobody. Or I should say not literally nobody, but Adam Thielen, who's going to be, the 3rd or 4th option on the offense now. Is something to be said for Young. So obviously this is like our do not draft tier, but I wanted to put the positive spin on him.
Yeah, I mean, also the new head coach, Canales, we talked about him with Baker, and we talked about him with Geno too. I think that's going to be a big thing for him. Let's not forget that he was the almost consensus #1 pick just a year ago. They also drafted Jatavian Sanders, who is a very good tight end prospect out of Texas too. So they really they fed him to the wolves last year, and it was really unfair for him. And it was such a bummer to see, as anyone who's followed Bryce Young for a long time. And I think if it doesn't work out this year, assuming health with the pieces around him, then we can start having that conversation, whether or not he's a bust. But they did everything in the offseason and in the draft to support him, which I, really respect. And when you have an owner like the Panthers do, you can't always assume that that's going to happen.
Seriously.
Yeah, I would probably move him up into the last chance tier just to throw him a bone, but he was pretty bad last year. So I get it.
He was awful. I mean, he wasn't even ownable, right? So that's the thing where that's part of the reason why we have him here, right? I mean, for all of his weapon faults, he straight up was on the waiver wire in our league most of the year. I mean,
Yeah.
through bye weeks and a couple of injuries and stuff, he got picked up. But like, we had Gardner Minshew owned all year type of thing. I mean, it wasn't exactly like somebody couldn't have owned him, but he was on the waiver wire a lot last year. So, anyways, that's the wrap up on him. He's going to be the most interesting name in this tier. I think the rest of these guys are kind of they'll get drafted, but they're kind of afterthoughts, starting with Russell Wilson. So the main issue with Russell Wilson is obviously that he could lose his starting job at any point. And drafting a guy like that is just really risky and can be a waste of a pick at this point, right? If you are picking your third or even your fourth quarterback and you're not going to be starting that player through the first few weeks of the season, and then he loses his job in week 5, what was the point in even taking him, right? Might as well just take Fields if you're going to sit on that spot. But I struggle with Wilson. I think he is going to be good for Pickens. I think he's going to be good overall for the offense compared to Kenny Pickett or compared to Mason Rudolph. Although I don't even know on Mason Rudolph, because Mason Rudolph was pretty dang good at the end of last year. So
he was okay.
I mean, he was pretty good. So, Wilson was atrocious. I mean, he was, I guess, a top 10 fantasy quarterback before he got benched at the end of last year. So, he does have some potential room for upside if he does keep the job. But the reason he's down here is just because he's going to start week 1, but they don't owe him any money, and he's got Fields breathing down his neck. And if they lose games, the Steelers could be trying to figure out who they would prefer to sign long-term. And if that's going to be Fields, they want to get a sizable look at him. So that's where I'm at with Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Same boat. We're going to hear Justin Field chants by week 6 if they're 2 and 4. I think the reason that you and I both like Pickens this year is both of those guys can support a number 1 wide receiver. We saw DJ Moore have the best fantasy season of his career last year. We know what Russ can do with the number 1, but in terms of quarterbacks on your roster, it's just a waste of a spot with him.
29, JJ McCarthy, your favorite player. I'll turn it over to you. What do you got?
I guess, similar to Russ, where we don't know, it's assumed that JJ McCarthy will finish the season as a starter. We don't know if Darnold is going to start the year. I personally think he should. I don't think that JJ's ready. I didn't really think highly of JJ as a prospect. I didn't really see him as a first round player, but I do think for both JJ and for Darnold, this was really the dream landing spot. And, Kevin O'Connell's system with the weapons that they have, I don't know. I just don't think he's that good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't know. I think we saw in the draft what teams actually thought, right? I mean, we were getting all this information that the Vikings were trying to trade up to 4. And that all fizzled away, I think, as soon as the Vikings figured out that nobody else wanted McCarthy. It was just them. They were kind of bidding against themselves. And the player that teams actually wanted was Michael Penix. And so, hopefully he can support.
Who we had higher than McCarthy preseason too.
Yeah. So hopefully he can support the offensive skill positions here, right? That's the main thing is Jordan Addison, right? I mean, obviously Jefferson's going to be Jefferson, but like Jordan Addison, and when Hawkinson comes back, is McCarthy going to be able to support them? I don't even know. And so, I don't think Darnold's going to be any better. I don't think they should be starting Darnold, even if they do. So whatever on Darnold. Don't pick Darnold if you're considering it. If Darnold is, Darnold is a starter,
this is not a. I'm the biggest Sam Darnold homer, but even I would not draft him. But I will say, as far as Minnesota,
don't do it.
As far as Minnesota in the draft, there was obviously those rumors that they were going to give up, 2 firsts to move up with the Chargers or whomever, even Arizona. They ended up with the quarterback that they wanted, but they also ended up getting Dallas Turner later in the first round, which was huge. I mean, he was projected to be a top 9-10 pick. So as far as the first round goes, hats off to him for getting those 2 guys.
Yeah, they did good. All right, So going to Jacoby Brissett. So I put most of the rookies in here, but I don't think that Drake May is going to start. He's the one that I actually don't think really has much of a chance to start week one. And the reason I think that is because they've kind of said that publicly quite a bit. And they've even
and he shouldn't.
That. Yeah, I don't think so either. They've even leaked publicly that he might sit all year. And honestly, with how bad New England's roster is, I wouldn't blame him for sitting him all year. Like, just, it's fine. You don't need to put him out there when he's not going to be in a position to succeed. Next year they can get a couple skill position guys and more linemen, and then set them up for more success on offense. And I think that that's kind of what they should do. But Jacoby Brissett. So all of that said, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's going to be the conversation about, is May going to start constantly throughout the year? So Brissett could also get benched here. Why he's down to 30. But Brissett overall, I think he's a solid quarterback. Just, if we knew he was going to start all year, I think he easily goes up into tier 5 and would be somebody that you could kind of rely on through bye weeks and things like that. But I don't know that that's going to be the case. So I'm not investing anything more than a late round flyer in him, even in Superflex.
Yeah, I think from a real life perspective, bringing in Brissett was the right move, and I do think that May should sit all year. But I do think that once they're out of it, maybe the last 4 games, they'll kind of let him get his feet wet and sling it around the field. I just can't.
Which would be fine.
I say this on every other podcast, but I just can't get over the fact that the Patriots had Ladd McConkey in their laps, traded down and reached on Jalen Polk. I mean, when you need to get your young quarterback guys that can get open and run solid routes, that just seemed like such a no-brainer, especially from New England, coming from their legacy of, these white slot cornerbacks that are easy targets. But I digress.
I couldn't believe that. I was like, not to get on a tangent during our quarterback rankings. The Chargers, when I saw the Chargers were trading up, I was floored. I was like, oh my gosh, why is New England letting that happen? I do not understand why they didn't just sit and take McConkey. And I had already, like, going into day 2 of the draft, I had already resigned to the fact that we weren't getting McConkey. And I was talking to you, I was talking to my dad, I was talking to anybody that would listen about how I thought they should take JPJ. Just kind of lean into this offensive line, reforming the offensive line.
Yep.
And then when they were able to trade up, I was like, I just didn't think that was going to be on the table. I didn't think New England was going to be willing to do that. So, anyways, small tangent, but we're done with Brissett here. So let's get into 31. Gardner Minshew,
your guy,
the legend. I expect him to start. But that's not a given. And, he does have to unseat Aiden O'Connell, who is the incumbent starter there. So, with the quarterback battle and something that uncertain, that's obviously going to push the price way down. I personally hope that it's going to be Gardner Minshew, because I think that would be really good for Devontae Adams. Minshew has proven that he can support a number 1 wide receiver, even a second wide receiver sometimes too, throughout his career. And I think Aiden O'Connell, if it is Aiden O'Connell, I would like to think that he's elevated his game to be able to beat out Minshew, so that, the overall offense will be better. But yeah, I have faith. I have more faith in Minshew, and I think he's going to be the starter here. And this is somebody that, I said, Brissett is going to face May, but I don't think he's going to face as much scrutiny as Minshew. And maybe I should have Minshew a couple spots higher here, maybe over JJ McCarthy. But with the fact that, like, he's not really the starter, it's just hard to move him up before we have more information.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Las Vegas is going to be an interesting team to watch, because he's got weapons. We know Devontae, we know Jacoby Myers is grossly underrated. We know, Brock Bowers is joining the team. So I think if he is the clear starter, he's going to be on, rosters, on not just on rosters, but in starting lineups in Superflex.
Yeah, no, I mean, he'll be. I will definitely draft him. So if he is the starter, so which, maybe that puts him above Russell Wilson, because I don't even know if I'm going to be in on Russell Wilson. So we'll see where he lands as we get a little closer to the season, if he is named the starter. And then the last pick, or the last player that we're going to talk about here, I don't know if this is a surprise. I've seen him creep up into like the 25 range, which I think is interesting, is Bo Nix. So he's rookie. He's going to start for Denver right off the bat. They don't have anybody else. And, he played so long in college. He's maybe a little bit more ready than somebody like Drake May to play right away. And I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in the Broncos offense hardly at all. They just traded Jeudy. The running back situation is a nightmare. I don't think Peyton's offense is very good. I think that was propped up by Drew Brees, and everybody's like, "Oh, Bo Nix is a perfect fit in Sean Payton's offense." And I'm just thinking, no, nobody's a good fit in Sean Payton's offense except for Drew Brees. So, I don't know. I struggle with Bo Nix. I don't think he's going to even be worth drafting. I struggle with him even in a 12-team Superflex league.
Yeah, his only redeeming factor is, like you said, that he's going to be the starter. And I guess as much as I've hated on Bo Nix the last 12 years, he actually had more he had more rushing production
since high school.
Dude, he's already in his mid-30s. He had almost 30 rush yards per game at Oregon. So he does kind of have a little bit of that, but yeah, I don't know. I think that he's hit his ceiling, and his ceiling was
in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and he should not have been a first-round pick. Obviously, Denver didn't have a second-round pick, so they kind of had what they felt like was a forced hand. But I don't think that he's going to be successful. I think maybe he can be a backup, a career backup if he's good enough, and he's obviously a football guy from a football family that's been around the game for a very long time. But yeah, he's not someone that I'm targeting at all. And like you said, with Denver, they've got so many like okay to below average pieces on their team that it's like people keep talking about like side tangent, but like which Denver RB are you going to target? I'm like, just none of them. I don't know. I don't want any part of it. I don't. Whatever.
The one that's there in round 14.
No.
Is Jaleel McLaughlin still there in round 14? Okay, sounds good. Maybe let's bring him on.
Yeah, McLaughlin seems to be everyone's darling this year, but I think people are just getting bored.
Oh my God, we'll forget him then. Who cares? He'll probably be gone then. Somebody will push him up into round 10 thinking he's going to be the starter when he's not. Okay, so with that, we went on a little tangent there at the end. If you're still with us, thank you so much for watching. That's part 2 of our quarterback rankings. We'll be going through, we'll be going through our position ranks throughout the next couple weeks here. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.